A real estate lead generation chatbot for Facebook Messenger. And in part one of this series, I explained that we're going to be using three systems. We're going to be using Dialogflow, which is AI from Google. It's the best AI for conversations on the market, and it's going to help you understand the messages that users send so that you can then create more intelligent responses, and then you can also get data out of those messages and automatically store that data and populate user profiles with the data that Dialogflow provides you with. We're going to store all of that data inside of Manychat, and we're going to use Manychat as a tool to manage our leads. And also we're going to be able to use its flow builder to create responses to those messages. So it's a fundamental difference between these two systems is that Dialogflow doesn't store data. It simply helps you understand the intent of a user, and it provides you with data that you can use to build more intelligent responses and populate user profiles. It doesn't store data for longer than 20 minutes. It's just temporary. Its strength is in the understanding the messages. Manychat will store that data, and it's really more of a marketing tool than I would say a chatbot tool. It is a marketing tool for a conversational experience. The third system that we're using is going to be Botsheets, which makes it easy for real estate agents to just manage their listings. Everyone understands how a spreadsheet works, and you can use Google Sheets as a database for content for a chatbot. You just enter in all your listings, some criteria about each listing, and a link to an image, and it's really easy for even non-technical people to manage. Real estate agents are busy, and if they need to add or update or change any of the listings, they can just do that directly in the spreadsheet. The chatbot will read from the Google Sheet and dynamically generate content for Messenger when users send messages. So all of these three systems work together really nicely. And in part one, we started with Dialogflow because I said that you can't really design a conversation because you don't know what the messages that users are going to send. You need to be able to anticipate. You need to be able to train AI to understand the messages that users send, and once a user sends a message, then you can sort of guide them down a path or a funnel and collect some additional data and get to the result that you need. But this is really the brain of the bot. Users are going to send a message, and if you don't understand those messages, then the user's just going to leave. You're never even going to get to the funnel. And that's because statistically, users just don't click buttons, and they don't want to click buttons. They don't want to, nobody really wants a bot, they just want to speak to the business. And the business, in this case a real estate agent or agency, is using automation to make it easier to capture the information that they need immediately because they're not going to be there to respond live a lot of the time. They're busy, they're out seeing properties, listing properties, showing properties. They're out there doing deals. So now we have in our Dialogflow agent, which is where we started, you see I have a list of intents, and we're going to use these intents to group similar messages together. And the intent that I thought was most valuable is this lead intent, so I just can search for it. And you can see that these are just examples of things that users might say. And we don't need to provide every phrase that a user would say, just some examples, so we can train the AI to learn the types of messages. And then further to that, we have words that are highlighted, and that allows us to get some possible values for any of these words. So you can see here that we have an entity for a thing that users might say they want to do, like they want to rent, they want to buy, they want to lease, they want to sell. So we only need this phrase as an example and a word that can have a number of possible meanings. And then so we define those, what those possible acceptable values are for the Dialogflow agent to understand in an entity. And so we've created one for that. And then, what is it that they're looking to buy, sell, lease, rent? I have condo, and that is a type of residential property that is also in a list of other types of residential properties. And you can see here we have NYC, which is one of the locations that we serve. And so let's first focus on that, because locations it's appropriate here. You need to, people are looking for a property to buy, sell, rent, lease, or whatever that action is in a particular location. So what we have here is I've created an entity called property locations. And if we jump to the entity, you can see here property locations. What I'll do is I'll list out all of the areas that I can serve the user. So these are I've just put in some cities all across the United States, and then you can see here I have synonyms. So I have this checked here, define synonyms, and it's just the different ways that users might express one of my locations. So New York City, if that's the location, then I'll put NYC there, right? I might put other areas of New York, within New York City, so Manhattan or Queens or the Upper East Side, and that's if I serve a number of different cities. I would probably do that. Otherwise, if I'm a real estate agent in New York City, I would list on the left side here. I would list all of the areas that I serve, because somebody who is looking for a property in New York City might say, I'm looking to rent a house in Queens, and because the real estate agent serves just the New York City area, you would have all of the areas within New York City that gives the user the best possible result of finding a property through a chatbot. So that's important. And so if we go back here, you can see that I added NYC as an example, because I want that a message that a user sends to find a possible value in that entity, and then I'm going to store that value in a parameter. You can see that I've named my parameter, which is like a user field basically, and I've named it property locations. And this is just an example of what the user might say. But I can also, what'll happen is if you don't define a list of possible locations, then Dialogflow is going to automatically assign one of its own entities to it. So you'll see here, let's try the same phrase, rent a condo in, let's think of a city we'll use a state, in Utah for 2 months in October. And you'll see here, I'm just going to enter that text. I'm going to hit enter. And you'll see here that that Dialogflow automatically detected that rent is a possible value and trigger from this entity. So that's why it's automatically highlighted. And obviously we have these things, and this is a system entity. Dialogflow detected that this is a duration of time. You can get a value for 2 months from the point of when the user sent the message to 2 months ahead. It's a format that another computer program will understand, like a calendar. And then we also got it recognized that October is a month. So that's why Dialogflow will automatically detect that. But it didn't highlight Utah, and that's because Utah is not a value in our locations. It didn't even know what Utah is. Sometimes it'll know, sometimes it won't. But what we can do is, if Utah is an example of where we provide real estate services, then we can just add that here, Utah. And Utah is a state, and so we could just click save, and maybe you can define cities within Utah or towns or just your specific area as synonyms. Or if you're only focused on Utah, you would just list all of those on the left side. But in this example here, I have a list of possible values. This is assuming it's a real estate agency that serves places nationally across the states and across a number of cities, and that's why it's set up this way. So it didn't understand it there, and we added the value to an entity, and now we can highlight it, and we can just, this menu pops up with our entities. And so I can see that this is property locations. I'll add it. And so now it's just another example. We've added that. Now, what about a city that we don't serve? Okay, so let's look at our list here, and I'm going to use the same thing. So, similar example. Instead of rent, I'm going to use buy a house in Toronto. And you can see here that Dialogflow automatically detected that this is buy is a value of our property action entity, and house is a value of our property residential entity. So that's why these were automatically highlighted for us. And it also highlighted the word Toronto, which is a city in Canada. And it detected that Toronto is a city, and it uses its system GeoCity entity. So this isn't particularly useful to us. If we decided that the agency is going to provide real estate properties in Toronto, then we would add Toronto to our property locations entity. But anything else other than the areas that we serve, we're going to want to change that. And we're also going to want to have an example phrase. And what we can use is we're going to use Dialogflow's system. It's sys.any. This is an entity that will capture anything, just anything. That's why you have any. And you can rename it, and you can see I've previously used this entity before, and I've named the parameter where the value is going to get stored in a parameter that I've named no locations, right? Because if we have a parameter, which is like a custom field named no locations, then we can use that as that field and to basically detect if we can help the user. If we don't have any locations or any properties in a location other than those listed here, then the value that we capture from that, we can then use that to say, give a more intelligent response. So that's important, is managing locations and having example phrases without where the highlighted location is anything but the locations that we serve, and capturing a value for that. That way, if the user is looking for property in any of these, we can then search for properties, and we'll use Botsheets for that. We're going to give them a list of properties in the areas or the area that the user is looking for. We're going to dynamically generate a gallery of properties that match that request. But if they're looking in an area where we don't have properties, we can just respond a different way to the user. So that's how you manage locations using Dialogflow. It's just a good way of doing it. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into how to take these parameters like property action or property residential or no locations, and how we're going to map those to Manychat. And that'll be in the third video. We're going to explain that you can, when data is stored temporarily in these Dialogflow parameters, that data can be automatically saved in Manychat user fields, and that's where that connection is made. Having actionable data for profiles, and being able to use that data to create intelligent responses. So that'll be in the next video.